Alix Duchamps is the creator of Brilliantly You, a safe space for imperfect people committed to growth. With a unique perspective shaped by her belief that perfection was never meant to make us thrive, Alex built a community centered on real talk about relationships, boundaries, mental health, and personal transformation. Through her writing and work, Alex explores the complex terrain of modern intimacy, from recognizing narcissistic patterns and toxic dynamics to understanding hyperindependence, vulnerability, and the art of saying no without guilt. Her approach is freshly honest. She meets people where they are, acknowledging, which is very true, that growth is messy, non-linear, and deeply human. Whether addressing highly sensitive partnerships, the power of vulnerability, or the challenge of setting boundaries, Alex brings candid and compassionate conversations that many find difficult to navigate. Above all, Alex is committed to helping people protect their peace while remaining open to genuine connection, a delicate balance in a world that often demands we choose one or the other. Gosh, there's a lot there. Thank you so much for taking time to talk today. It's very, very kind of you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our discussion.
So I just wanted to start, as I normally start, by taking you back a little bit, just to understand who you were as a teenager, and maybe whether the 16-year-old Alex would recognize who Alex is today.
So I would say, I think most people would say I was a different person when I was a teenager than now. So, but still during those, let's say, adolescent years, I was two different versions of myself because there was Alex at home, so inside, and then there was Alex outside. So at home, I was a bit more of an introverted version of myself. I've always been a sensitive person, a happy child, always very social, and had no hard time making friends. So that was really the bubbly, extroverted side of me. But as soon as I was at home, I was really I was a bit more to myself, let's say. I kept myself busy doing a lot of creative things. So my parents always saw me as the very good child. I never really caused a problem. My little sister was the one throwing tantrums, but I was more of the quiet type. But then I would say outside, I was a totally different person because there was like, especially during my teenage years, I think you go through this identity crisis where obviously you're full of hormones, you don't really know who you are, you're still figuring things out. Your parents tell you still what to do, but you're on the way of becoming an adult, but you're not there yet. So you think, okay, well, what do you guys know? Obviously. But so I would say during my adolescence, I became a bit more like a tough version of myself. I was still very bubbly and authentic, and but a lot of people saw me as arrogant or intimidating, and I think that was just because I was starting to get out of that really happy child bubble. One of those reasons was just me trying to figure out who I was. And then also around the age of 15, I got into my first romantic relationship. And that was absolutely not the first relationship you want to have. It was not a good experience. It was a very toxic relationship. It was very abusive in the sense that I was with someone who was very possessive and jealous, and I got lied to, I got betrayed. So there were a lot of factors that made my shield that I was building as a teenager, made that shield become even harder. And up to a certain point where then I just realized, okay, something's not right here. Something needs to change. When you don't recognize yourself up to certain points, that's when you see, okay, there's a little bit of an issue. But I didn't really have a traumatic childhood or teenage period. It's just navigating, I would say.
And what do you think it was that led you from where you were then to who you become today? So what do you think started you off on this journey to explore these very intimate, very vulnerable, very difficult topics? What was it that drew you to this path, do you think?
I think I had enough experiences in friendships and relationships that just made me lose who I was
Okay.
completely. And I got to a certain point when I was a bit wiser and older, let's say mid 20s, I started thinking, wait, who am I really? And I was acting in ways that didn't reflect who I thought I was or who I wanted to be. And that's why when I was really, really low after a breakup, also another toxic relationship, I realized, okay, you're always with the same kind of toxic people. It's always the same pattern. There must be an issue. There's some deeply rooted, yeah, insecurity or something like that that needs to be addressed. And that's when I started doing coaching, because when you don't feel like you are yourself anymore, there's a problem there.
Definitely, and a lot of people take a long, long time, if ever, to realize that. That's something as sort of read on your website and heard you talk about before is that your work centers on what you call real talk, world's performance over authenticity. I just wonder what your thoughts are around the importance of being vulnerable, accepting vulnerability as something that we should embrace as opposed to something we should protect against.
I think a lot of people, I mean, it was my case, and I know a lot of people in my surroundings or family, friends even, we have this belief, I think also society, that vulnerability is seen as a weakness. And like you just mentioned, we live in a world, in a society that does reward performance, and vulnerability, I mean, it's something that was very taboo, I would say, for the past years. Now we talk about it more and more. People are more focused on self development and coaching and all of that. But I think for me, I think I really had to lose myself and feel completely disconnected from who I was to see that my actions were not reflective of my values. This is where coaching helped me a lot. And I think toxic relationships, being with the wrong crowds, developing very toxic and unhealthy habits too, made me realize that my authenticity and vulnerability were completely in the back somewhere. Everything was hidden. And that gave me a fake sense of control, so to say. I thought, okay, by not showing my vulnerability, I am in control of what I show to other people. But in the end, that was just an illusion, because obviously not being vulnerable kills connection. Because if you don't allow people in, or people to see you for you and to be fully yourself, it's very difficult to build connection. And this is why I think the real strength really comes from being fully yourself and trusting yourself enough to be vulnerable and to know that if things don't go as planned or as you would want them to, that you're going to be able to get back up and just do that by being 100% yourself. It's not easy, for
Mm.
sure. It's a whole journey. But I think part of that is also knowing who you are. And obviously, that's not always that easy. You're shaped throughout your experiences. But I think withholding your vulnerability doesn't avoid you from feeling pain. It just disguises it in a way. It's actually, for me, it's being vulnerable is a real strength. And I wish more people would realize that.
It's really interesting you say that. 'Cause when I was at in my last corporate job, one of the and I felt at the time one of the biggest compliments I got from somebody in my team, and they sort of said, "Oh, your management style is very different. You come across very vulnerably." And first of all, I thought, "Oh gosh, that doesn't sound very good." But that, actually, what they were saying is that I was very open and willing to share parts of myself with the team. So I wasn't trying to be, a leader over the team. I was trying to work with them from a position of being vulnerable, so that I was giving as much as I was getting back from them. So is that what you mean by vulnerability being a power?
It's really allowing people to see you for you, because generally, whether you have insecurities or certain fears, we don't want people to exploit that to use it
Mm.
against us. So we rather keep those parts
Mhm.
hidden. And in my opinion, it doesn't allow people to see you for you 100%. So I think vulnerability was kind of stamped as a weakness, even though it's, in my opinion, vulnerability is exposure, is feeling, is being seen, letting other people see you for you.
So is there a
Yeah.
difference between vulnerability and emotional availability, or are they the same?
Yes, there is a difference for me between emotional availability and vulnerability. When you're emotionally available, you're basically open and accessible. to other
Yep.
people. So by being open and emotionally available, you pave the way for others to be open as well. Doesn't mean they're gonna be, but at least you're showing them that you're open to. And like I said, being vulnerable is more about exposing ourselves and allowing ourselves to be seen. So I think they are clearly very distinct, but they're conditional to one another. First, you need to be emotionally available. And then once both are actually emotionally available, that's when vulnerability can come in. But for that, you need to feel safe enough to do so.
So one of the themes that you talk about is that boundaries start with no, and I just want to unpick that a little bit because I guess in my head, relationships, whether they be friendships, whether they be business relationships, whether they be intimate relationships, they require openness and sensitivity
Mhm.
and yeah, but being genuine with one another. So I just wonder, is there any contradiction between starting off with strong boundaries versus starting off with complete openness and transparency? I wonder, do the two work together, or are they yeah, do they sort of oppose one another?
I would say that many of us mistake boundaries with having a shield up or having protective
Mhm.
walls up. But in my opinion, walls definitely block connection and intimacy. And I see boundaries as more of a tool to guide people to you. Basically, boundaries, they show people the way. You're basically just setting certain standards by setting boundaries. So I do think that boundaries are crucial if you want to be genuinely open with other people. Because if you don't have boundaries, you're always going to be in this certain fear mode where you don't know what's coming, and you're always going to have this defensive mode when it comes to other people. And if you know who you are, if you know what your boundaries are, and you're willing to implement those, I think it makes it way easier to be really genuinely yourself. Because basically, yeah, I see boundaries as a very strictly necessary tool. And one thing I learned, and there was a sentence that really stuck with me when I did
Mhm.
coaching and I started implementing my boundaries. My coach said to me, the only people who are calling you out for having boundaries are the ones who benefited from you not having any to begin with. And I thought this sentence was so true, because people who care for you and who have similar boundaries to you and similar values, they're actually going to congratulate you on having boundaries. They're going to say, okay, way to go. You're doing great. But others who are actually taking advantage of you not being able to set boundaries, well, they're obviously not going to like it. So they're going to call you out. And I think that in order to be really genuinely yourself, you need to know what your non-negotiables are, what your limits are. That's for me very crucial to be genuinely yourself. And I do believe that boundaries are what makes authenticity possible for ourselves and also with other
Mm.
people.
I no, I think I understand. Just that an add-on question then. So, like a lot of things, so whilst creating and developing and having our own boundaries is critically important, presumably it only works if the people we're dealing with knows what those boundaries are. So it's not something we should keep to ourselves, then I assume. So how do you have that conversation in a workplace friendship, intimate relationship without it coming across as right, here are my 10 rules that I sort of live by. Maybe that's the way to do it, but how do you have that conversation about these are my boundaries without somebody feeling offended or feeling that you don't trust them? Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I don't know if I have the 100% an answer to that. I think first of all, it's very difficult to to express yourself in an environment if you don't feel safe in that
Yeah.
environment, okay? First of all. So I think that's one of the prerequisites, let's say, to setting boundaries, is that you need to feel safe enough to be able to open up
Mhm.
about those. But I think it starts really at the bottom, which is if you know who you are, what your values are, what your non negotiables are, it's way easier to see, okay, right now, this decision or this situation that's happening is clearly crossing or overlapping with one of my values. And I think analyzing this already is a very important step. But then to actually have that discussion with someone
Mm.
else, I think you just need to explain to them that it's not about just them, it's about you. It's something you're not comfortable with. And I think if you don't have someone who's completely, let's say, unreasonable in front of you, mostly people get it when you explain it to them. And if they don't, well, that's maybe
That's maybe a sign.
an indicator that something else is talking.
So
Yeah.
if so, well, you said you weren't sure you could explain it very well. You explained it very well. Just if someone has perhaps been in a difficult relationship, maybe it's a toxic friendship or toxic relationship with a partner, etc., then we often say to them as friends, "Oh gosh, you're putting your walls up, you're blocking people from coming." I can see how boundaries that perhaps have been exploited in one sense almost then become twice as thick to become walls. And I wondered, how do you, when you work with clients, how do you help them create what might be defined as healthy boundaries as opposed to solid walls?
We're not going to end up with the same boundaries. So I would say the most important is really to start at the beginning and figure out what your values are, and based on that, see what kind of boundaries you need to implement in order to be comfortable, feel safe. Because unfortunately, almost 90% of the case, people are not going to draw the line for you, right? If you don't do
Yeah.
it, no one's going to do it for you. So it's really important for you to know what your non-negotiables are, because sometimes we tell ourselves, I will be fine if this were to happen, even though I don't really like it or I'm not really comfortable with it, but it's okay, I'm going to say yes, or I'm going to do the exception this time. But if it sits unwell with you, if you even have like a little bit of a
Mhm.
doubt, I always say listen to your gut feeling. And sometimes we're so used to actually just ignoring that gut feeling completely that we don't even know where to start anymore and what feels right, what doesn't feel right. So I would say these are the first steps to really start implementing, figuring out how and what kind of boundaries you want to
Yeah.
implement.
You read a piece that I really enjoyed. It's called "Love Bombing to Gaslighting." So two phrases that sort of didn't hear sort of 10 years ago, whereas now they're very prevalent, which addresses narcissistic patterns. And I wonder what you found are the early warning signs that someone is experiencing manipulation or perhaps at worst coercion in a relationship. Things that people might think, "Oh, I've just been anxious," or been too sensitive, but actually there is something there they should be aware of. What are the signs that people should be aware of?
I think my experience is has a lot to do with my answer in this case, but I grew up in a family where we were not really taught to talk and communicate. So basically when there were issues, my dad, he didn't really talk when he was feeling unwell, my mom either. So me and my sister, we really had to learn to do that for ourselves. So it was already a big challenge to
Yeah.
begin with. On top of that, you add being a real empath, a real sensitive person. So for me, it's always been really tough to say even how I feel. And when I finally found, let's say, the courage to
Mhm.
do so on my healing journey, and I was in the wrong relationships and toxic relationships, I felt like every time I was expressing my feelings, those were constantly dismissed or minimized or invalidated. And when that started to happen again and again and in different relationships, and I heard it also from other people, I just really noticed that all of us should be able to express how we feel. And if we're made to feel bad about what we're expressing, it's a big warning sign, because it's something to say, oh yeah, well, let's say you're such an idiot, I don't like how you act. That's really pointing the finger. But if you really express yourself in an I form and say, I feel like this is how it made me feel, I'm just explaining to you, and they're being completely dismissive about it, or they start to gaslight you, and then you're being told, oh, you're too sensitive or you're too dramatic. I've been told a lot of times that I was too much in that sense. that's deeply invalidating, and for me has a little bit of a manipulative side to it too. And when it really gets to a point where they make you question your own feelings, whether you're exaggerating or not, they make you question your reality, and they almost make you feel guilty for actually having those emotions and expressing those emotions, that's generally not a good sign. And for me, it is a sign of manipulation. Then again, no one's perfect, obviously. I think in a relationship, both learn from one another as well. But if it's something you've clearly addressed and your partner just doesn't want to understand it and doesn't change it, I think it's likely that you're with someone who's a bit manipulative.
It's interesting you said that people have told you before that you're maybe too much. And I've had the same experience. People saying too much, or too emotional, or too intense, or too sensitive, and all of those things that actually it's hard because people are negating the value of your depth, your ability to be able to feel deeply. And I never felt it was a flaw. But when people keep saying, too, it does feel quite hard. I just wondered how you help people recognize that actually it's not that you're too emotional, too intense, too sensitive, too much. It's that other people perhaps aren't able to emote the same level of feelings themselves, so perhaps they feel defensive when I'm being too emotional or too intense or too raw or too sensitive, whatever. How do you almost guide people that it's not a failing in them, it's more the situation that they're in?
I would say it's very difficult to accept that we're emotional. I would say it's difficult for other people to accept that we're emotional if, first of all, we don't accept it in ourselves. And for years, for example, I have struggled to not be as emotional, but in the end, it just keeps coming to slap you back in the face. So I think, first of all, if you are aware that this is who you are and that you're proud of it, that's step one. Because in the end, other people are not going to be able to impact you just as much if you know who you are and you're proud of it. You know what I mean? But for me, I was almost ashamed of being so emotional and sensitive for all those years, for making a big fuss about so many things that actually, when I was being told, oh, I'm too much, I'm too sensitive, that actually hurt because it was a weakness I was seeing in myself. But with time, I got to see that it's actually not a weakness. It's a superpower because we get to feel stuff other people don't feel. We get to see even the little tiniest things other people don't see. We get to feel an energy in a room, and I think it allows us to connect to others in such a different way, on a way deeper level. And that's so important for intimacy as well, because intimacy is, I mean, it's not just scratching on the surface, right? It's going way beneath that. So I think that what's also very important is you got to learn to sit with your emotions. In the beginning, it can be very
Mm.
uncomfortable, right? Because you don't really know how to deal with it. But once you really figure out how to do that, it makes you calmer. And so I think that's very important. And then I can give you a very small example, but I used to not cry for years. I just couldn't shed a tear. And when I really did the work for 2 years, I mean, I'm still doing the work, we're evolving every day, right? But I got so in tune with myself that now I cry like every little thing, It can be a movie, it can be good news, it can be bad news, it can be just like a cute little attention, it could be a postcard. Sometimes it feels a little silly because you're like, okay, seriously now? But but in the end, I know that when I feel those great emotions, I know that I feel them to, it's not just 100%, it's 1,000%. And so when you're emotional in sad moments and hurtful moments, that's when the tricky part comes, right? But when you see what you have to gain, when you see the beauty of life in such an intensified and aware way, it's actually a superpower. Yeah,
Do you think part of the reason that you held off on showing your emotion physically, as in crying, was because you were scared where the emotion might take you?
absolutely. And I think it's the case for so many people. It's a shame. I know it's scary. Probably, I mean, because you're asking me this question, probably you've been there too. I don't
Yeah.
know. And it can be scary, but I think not dealing with it or not going there is even scarier because you slowly walk away from yourself. And in the end, maybe it's going to hit you in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, and you're going to feel completely not like
Mm.
yourself. And I think it's such a shame. And I wish more people would be more, let's say, less afraid to really scratch below the surface and go feel what's uncomfortable at first, but can be really empowering if you let it.
It's interesting. We have a sort of saying, and I'm sure it's worldwide, that a lot of time we're in our own heads, or we live in our heads. And I therapy for different things, and I always struggle with sort of what I would call traditional therapy, feeling it sort of stopped here, stopped at the neck, and then they might fix this bit, but then all the rest of it, all the sort of somatic feelings, emotions that sit within my body. Whenever I feel tension, I feel tension in my stomach or my back aches, and I always feel it very, very physically. And I always find it very, very hard to almost talk the emotion out of my body. Just wonder, do you see that distinction, that sometimes we almost spend so much time thinking and analyzing and assessing and evaluating all this brain work, that we sort of forget about actually you're holding your shoulders are like this, or your arms are like this. You're holding the tension, you're holding the pain in your body, really, and how we go about releasing not just what we're feeling in our heads, but what we're holding on to in our soul, in our bones, in our skin. How do you? Yeah, I just wonder what your thoughts were on the distinction.
Yeah, so releasing, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the best at releasing. I still struggle with that sometimes because I'm a bit more on the overthinking side of things. So I totally get that. Just like you said, for me, it's also the stomach. I mean, I literally, since I'm a little child, I get stomach aches whenever I'm stressed out or nervous
Same.
or anxious.
Um,
But I think that really, if we allow ourselves to stop in those moments where we feel not
mhm.
comfortable, it allows us to reconnect with our body. And generally we tend to do the exact opposite, is when we feel unwell, we try to fill our day-to-day or life, and we're less and less present with those feelings. For example, you have those people, they're out for dinner or whatever every night, they cannot sit alone with themselves, or they're constantly busy or constantly doing sports or constantly watching TV or whatever it is, whatever fits for them. And I think that if we really, for me, I really forced myself to sit with those uneasy feelings and really started to reconnect with my body once I started slowing
Mm.
down. And that can have various forms. For some people, it's meditation. For others, it's breath work. It can be a walk in nature. It can be dancing. It can be all kinds of things, really. Writing helps me a
Mhm.
lot too, to get out of my head and reconnect with myself. But I think it's very personal. It's also very shaped by your past, your background. So there's no real universal answer to that, I would say.
Just an awareness, and like I say, I do think a lot of people exhibit masking behaviors to almost just hide it, or push it away and push it away and push it away. But then at some point, that at some point you can't keep pushing it away anymore, and it does become something you've got to deal with. But I totally agree. Getting out in nature, and or breathing or sitting is something we perhaps don't do enough. And I do want to talk a little bit about. We have a society now where we're able to connect pretty much with anybody anywhere in the world. So you're in Luxembourg, I'm in the UK. I was talking to somebody in Australia this morning, and my wife's from Australia, talks to her family in Australia on the phone and sees them every day. And it's so we're able to connect with people everywhere and anywhere. But at the it almost feels like we are less connected emotionally than we've been perhaps in the past. Whether we are having an increasing number of superficial contacts and relationships, and we're having fewer and fewer deeper contacts. And I wonder, yeah, why is there such a distinction between the online connected world and the real world of actually talking to people?
I definitely agree with you. We're so connected that it makes it definitely more difficult to have real connection. And I think that this is really the danger for, let's say, all those young people right now with all their social media, their TikToks and Instagram and all of that, because it really impacts how people communicate on a day to day, because we're not really practicing anymore how to pick up the
Yeah.
phone and call when there's an issue, right? We can do everything online, we type, we text. So it adds a certain layer of protection. It basically shifts responsibility away, kind of, because you're all of us are behind our screens, and it's just not the same exchange anymore. It's not the same depth, it's not the same conversations, and basically we're focusing more on quantity than quality, right? Because we're consuming
Yes.
so much content every day. So I think the younger generations are definitely going to have more of a problem with that than maybe older
Mm.
generations.
And I think a really interesting example is if you I guess two examples that are different but the same. So relatively recently, the Catholic Church chose a new pope, and relatively recently, Taylor Swift went on a global Eras tour, and it was interesting. Whenever you watched both instances, so people in St. Peter's Square or people at Wembley or in Chicago, whatever, watching Taylor Swift, people were tending to watch the event that they paid thousands of dollars for. It's a once in a lifetime event through their phones. It was almost this human need that we have this barrier between us and the thing. Very few people were actually just there, remembering and experiencing the moment. And I don't know how many people actually watched the video back. Probably very, very few. But it just, yeah. So people were paid $1,000 to go to a Taylor Swift concert, or spent 3 nights camped out in St. Peter's Square, and but watched it through their phone. And I don't know whether there's something about the we're so used to connection through this whatever it is 10 centimeter screen. It just feels very, very odd. And I do think in 5, 10, 20 years time we'll look back and think, what were those people doing? I do think we'll look back and think it was
Yeah,
very, very odd thing to do.
I definitely agree. And I think part of it, I mean, as humans, we want to belong,
Mhm.
right? It's all about belonging and connection. And I think the problem, or let's say the backside of social media and all those, like you say, filming during a concert and not really being present at the concert, is people want to show where they are. It's not just for memory
Mhm.
at this stage. They want to show, I'm here too. I belong to that crowd, to that community. So I think it's nice up to a certain extent, because obviously communities are very
Yeah.
nice, right? You want to be part of something you're interested in. We have the same values or beliefs or whatever it is. But if it takes you away from the present moment and it's just about this belonging and showing people where you are, what you're doing, and that you're maybe even worthy of being part of a certain community just because you're there or you're doing it, I think it's a bit more sad, I would say, in that sense. Yeah.
Is that sort of sense that we are looking for or in need of external validation? And
Yeah,
whether that's a
absolutely.
like or a share or a comment or whatever. So if we just recorded it for ourselves and we watched it, it was one thing. But I think the big thing is posting that on social media, and people, oh wow, were you at the Taylor Swift concert, Alex? That was amazing. What did you think? Oh, I was there as well, or I couldn't get tickets. Oh wow, you're so lucky. You're so great. You're so amazing. You know, aren't I wonderful?
Mhm.
And yeah, it's it's odd. I mean, maybe we've always had it through society, but it was just people, our friends, telling us that. Whereas now it's strangers telling us that we're never going to meet, and that we're never going to know. That we look for that validation, which is I don't see how it can be a good thing. I can't see any positives about it really. Um, and I
Mhm.
do think it's linked somewhat to well, a lot of people used to perhaps, or maybe some people still do, have a perfectionist streak or want to feel things are perfect. And I know that Brilliantly You is described as a safe space for imperfect people that are committed to growth. The notion of imperfect people, which basically is everybody committed to. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how the strive and drive for perfection is actually perhaps a weakness or an enemy of genuine connection.
Let's say that I think we all have our own definition of
Yeah.
perfection, right? But to me, it's like being impeccable, being flawless. And for me, if you're striving to be someone who's good all the time and who represents themselves in their best possible light, it waters your personality down, right? It removes your authenticity. And like I mentioned before, I think authenticity is so important if you want to connect to people who are going to love you or like you for you,
Mhm.
right? Otherwise, they're just connecting to some fake version of you, to some mask. So I think when we strive to be perfect all the time, and when perfection is really the motto for everything we do in our life, we attract people who value performance over presence and just genuine people. And I think that perfection goes a little bit in the direction you were heading to before with the
Mm.
concert. It does pressure us and it robs us of the present moment we're in because when you're striving to be perfect all the time, there's no pause to it. You're always running on this hamster wheel, let's say, and you're not really in the present moment. You're always thinking about how to act, how to be a certain way. And same goes for the future. You always think ahead. Ooh, how am I going to have to deal with this situation, be in this particular context? So I think that for this reason, perfection is really what kills connection and intimacy.
Mm. I think the naming Brilliantly You compared to Perfect You, it might not feel too different, but it does feel completely different and completely meaningful in terms of what that looks like. So it's wonderful to be brilliant, but to be perfect is you're only ever going to be disappointed because there's no some at some point in life external factors are going to influence your exam results, your relationships, your friendships, your career, all of those things that are outside of your control completely. So if you set yourself up to feel that it's never failed, it's always be perfect, it's just going to feel more and more painful when something does happen that you weren't expecting or weren't able to manage.
Absolutely. And in the end, I can talk for myself. I'm sure for you it's the same way. If we didn't go through all the experiences we went through, we wouldn't be
Yeah.
here today. I think it's literally being imperfect and messy and whatever that just makes us grow and makes us learn. If we were just like little perfect soldiers, I mean, we would just have such a narrow mindset, right?
Mm, absolutely. Now, our experiences for good or bad do make us who we are. And I often think, gosh, if I could go back and do that again, would I? Well, if I did, then it would change, and all these other things
Exactly. Yeah.
would change really. So, do you think it's possible to know when you are? And it's going to sound like a silly question. Is it possible to know when you truly are being your authentic self? What does that what does that feel like, and when would I know that I'm being truly authentic?
That's a very, I'm going to say, very personal question, but I would say that if you have a
Mhm.
starting point and you know what's important to you, like I said before, what your values are, and you act according to those, and you feel at ease with that, right? And you're not some watered down version or restrictive version of yourself, then I think that's a really good way to start. And I think being authentic is feeling at ease with whatever you do, whatever you say, however you feel, because all the times where I haven't been my authentic self, I felt that something
Mhm.
was off, you know? And I think we're lucky to have those feelings, those gut feelings, those instincts, if you may say. And the thing is, we just need to tune into them. And sometimes we have a hard time doing that because of pressure we feel from family, society, or certain performance we need to put up to please
Mm.
others.
But it's almost counterintuitive because we think we're doing something to please others, but actually, all of us know people that are very genuine, very authentic, and always themselves, and that's a much more attractive and desirable quality in a friend, in a colleague, in a partner, isn't it? So we do these things because we think we're doing it because other people expect it, but actually, if we really were the people we're supposed to be, and we were very genuine, very authentic, and we live the life according to the value, is the right thing to be.
Exactly. And I'm a firm believer that you attract what you give out to other
Yes.
people. So if you're your authentic self and you're genuine, that's exactly the kind of people you're going to
Mhm.
attract. But if you live in this made up little perfect world where you wear a mask and you don't want to scratch below the
Mm.
surface, then it's very likely that you're going to attract those people
Mhm.
too.
Are you still very focused on, and it's probably the wrong word, but self development, understanding yourself, really knowing yourself? Do you think there'll ever come a point where you say, no, that's it, I know enough now? Or is it just a hunger to know more and more about yourself, but also about situations, environment, culture, life?
I think it's a very good question because it's definitely something I'm very passionate about. Reason number one is because it helped me so much. But I do believe that we're never fully grown into the person we are now, right? We keep developing ourselves throughout our life. I mean, I don't know what's going to be in 5 years. Those experiences I'm going to have until then are going to shape me further down the line. But I do think that it's also very easy to fall into a trap once you've started with self development. And like you say, you want to analyze and understand yourself better and better. I think it's very easy to fall into the trap of, ooh, more and more, let's analyze further. And then you get to a point where it actually doesn't make sense at all anymore because you're just in your head all the time and you're trying to find meaning in every little bits of your life, where I just think, okay, sometimes we just need to take a step back and just breathe and relax and say, okay, today I'm having a shitty day. It's okay. I'll just let it go. Tomorrow, it'll be a new start. So I think that self development, yes, definitely something I'm going to pursue. I love it. I think it's
Mm.
necessary. Like you said at the beginning, not everyone gets there, unfortunately. But I do think that also we need to give ourselves a little bit more grace. And if things don't work out or if we like crap, we need to let that go too, because that's just, it's part of life, right? Not every day is perfect. Not every day makes sense. And not everything needs to be
Mm.
understood. So I think there's a really fine line not to cross there.
Do you remember when you were first able to say and believe that you love yourself and that you're enough?
Difficult to say. You mean if I can pinpoint
I just
it to a
wondered whether, yeah,
specific
whether it came
moment?
actually once you got out of those difficult toxic relationships, you embraced that, or whether perhaps you were very young. Some people that I would ask would say, "Oh, I've never thought that. I just say I love myself." But yeah, I just wondered what, or is it something that's evolved? That you've become stronger and stronger attached to that feeling, or yeah, or was it something that happened after a particular event?
I think I had it. I remember myself as a child. I used to love myself as a child, then teenager, way less because my self esteem was shattered for so many reasons. And I have days where I really do love myself now, but then I also have days where I still feel guilty. I feel like crap, when things don't go as planned, or when I'm emotionally having a low day, or when I don't manage to, let's say I'm at work, right, and something doesn't go as planned. So these are little setbacks, or if I have in my relationship, if I'm having a discussion or a fight with my partner, right, that these are all little
Mm.
challenges that sometimes feel like failures. So it's very easy to fall back into your negative, let's say, thinking mode in that sense. But I would say I know I'm not perfect. I have my flaws, obviously, but I love the fact that I'm not afraid to be myself. And I think that's most important in the end.
That's a great answer. So how do you protect and nourish your own well-being, so mental well-being, I guess, in particular? So because you think about and you work with difficult topics and some complicated situations and things that aren't always, sunshine and light, really. So I wonder how do you make sure you can show up as the person you want to be? How do you protect and nourish yourself?
I would say in today's society, what's the most important, and I noticed this for
Hmm.
myself, is I really try not to compare myself with others because, to be honest, I have Instagram, and I once did just 1 month without even opening the app, and the difference was huge. I felt so much better. But then again, my account, Brilliant to You, is also on Instagram. So it's not like I can
Yeah.
completely not be on Instagram. It's a very
Mhm.
useful tool. But I think part of my mental well being is to know that I'm on my own timeline. I'm my own person. I'm not perfect. And seeing all those lives online can be very, very draining because obviously, yeah, you fall into the comparison trap. And I think that's one of the main reasons why I would really use it sparingly if you struggle with that. And then I would say listening to myself and my needs all the time. I used to not do that because I felt guilty for, let's say, not going to a specific dinner or birthday party. And now if I don't want to do something, I say it in a very polite way. I explain it to the person. And most of the time, like I told you, people will
Yeah.
understand that they might not always like it, but if they have a little bit of common sense and, empathy, they're going to understand it. And other than that, I just stopped doing stuff that didn't feel like myself, or that didn't make me feel good. So I'm really listening to myself way more than I used to.
Thank you. And I think my final question. You were very generous with your time. Thank you. And you maybe answered this answered this already, actually, to say that you couldn't answer it. But I wonder you um, what you think the future might look like for you in 5 or 10 years time, or where you hope the future might be in 5 or 10 years time. Do you set, not necessarily set goals, but do you have a vision for the business, for where you want to get to, for your own self awareness? Do you have a view as to what that might look like in a decade?
Well, I hope that obviously Brilliant EU is gonna reach
Mhm.
more people, right? I got some very positive feedback so far from people saying, wow, I've never felt understood in this way, because often self development can be very teaching a lesson, you got to do this
Mhm.
and this and this. So this is really one of my main goals. And I would like to, in the near future, organize retreats around self development, also with the coach I worked with, because she's amazing. She's actually in the UK as well, just like you. Yeah. So I really want Brilliant to You to take off. And my main goal so far.
And for people that haven't been to the website yet, I mean, I'll put the links in the notes and things. It is a very, how do I describe it? It's
Thank
a
you.
very welcoming space. So it's very informative without being lecturing. And I exactly the same thing. I've
Exactly.
been to so many, gosh, oh my goodness, so many different websites or different courses and things. And as soon as somebody starts, and this sounds too defensive, as soon as somebody starts telling me how I should feel and how I can get to that point,
Exactly.
it I my boundaries are my wall. It's like,
Exactly.
well, first of all, you're telling me and you're telling another 1,000 people the same things. How can you really know me?
Mhm,
And I think the only way to
mhm.
really become yourself or embrace yourself or welcome yourself is to make the journey yourself. Yeah, yes, with guidance, with help, with advice. With some of the pieces you write are very beautifully written. I think, oh yeah, there's something. Yeah, that actually, yeah, gosh, that gaslighting, that highly sensitive person. Gosh, that does feel, and you can feel and you can take
Mhm.
what you want from your content. Is what I'm trying to say. And it's not sort of forced upon you. So I think you have a very
Exactly.
yeah, you have a very warm and embracing sense to what you've created. So I think it's really good. So I would hopefully people will go and have a look
Thank
and yeah, and share their thoughts with you as well, which I'm sure will be. But I think a retreat where people actually get to spend time with other people, feeling that energy and recognizing that there are other people out there that are looking for something that they haven't perhaps found yet. And we're not all looking for the same thing or looking in the same place, but being in a space that encourages us to be ourselves and recognize that there's a way to become ourselves, I think is a really great ambition. So yeah, I look forward to seeing when that comes about.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you so much for
Oh,
having
pleasure.
me for this great discussion. It was very
Oh, thank you so
enriching.
much, and you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much.